Have you ever asked yourself why you know exactly what to do to change your life, yet day after day you wake up and repeat the same behaviors, the same excuses, the same silent betrayals of your own potential, as if some unseen force is quietly steering you away from the very success you claim to desire? Consistency is not a habit. It is not a routine. It is not a motivational trick or a productivity technique. Consistency is a psychological verdict you deliver upon yourself every single day, a verdict that either declares you the master of your inner world or the prisoner of your impulses. Most people misunderstand this because they want success to feel natural, to flow effortlessly from inspiration or talent or favorable circumstances. But Napoleon Hill understood something far more disturbing and far more powerful. Success is not built by those who feel ready, motivated, or confident. It is built by those who have trained themselves to act with precision, even while doubt is screaming inside their mind, even while fear is tightening its grip, even while every emotional signal is begging them to retreat into comfort. The world you live in today is a reflection of the consistency of your past thoughts, decisions, and behaviors. Nothing more, nothing less. Your bank account, your discipline, your confidence, your self-respect, your frustration, your regret, all of it is evidence of what you repeatedly did or refused to do long before you ever saw the results. Hill taught that the mind is a habit-forming machine, and it does not discriminate between constructive repetition and destructive repetition. It merely obeys. And once the mind has been conditioned through repetition, it resists change with ruthless efficiency. This is why inconsistency is so seductive. It feels harmless in the moment. One skipped day, one delayed decision, one compromise justified by fatigue, by emotion, by circumstance, but the subconscious mind records every act of inconsistency as an instruction. It learns that your word is negotiable. It learns that your goals are optional. It learns that discomfort is a signal to stop. And once the subconscious has accepted these instructions, it begins to sabotage you automatically, without conscious effort, without warning, without mercy. Hill warned that drifting is the most common cause of failure. Drifting is not laziness. Drifting is not stupidity. Drifting is the absence of a fixed, enforced consistency of purpose. A drifter moves when pressure is applied and stops when pressure is removed. A drifter feels inspired and then disappears. A drifter starts strong and fades quietly. And the tragedy of drifting is that it does not feel like failure while it is happening. It feels like rest. It feels like patience. It feels like waiting for the right time until years pass and the weight of unrealized potential becomes unbearable. Consistency is the opposite of drifting. Consistency is the act of forcing your behavior to align with your decision, regardless of your emotional state. Hill made it painfully clear that emotion is not a reliable guide for action. Emotion fluctuates, desire fluctuates, confidence fluctuates, but success demands a level of behavioral loyalty that transcends mood. When you force yourself to be consistent, you are not being harsh, you are being honest. Honest about the fact that your feelings are not designed to build greatness. They are designed to preserve comfort. This is why definiteness of purpose is the foundation of consistency. Without a clearly defined purpose, consistency feels meaningless. Pain without meaning becomes torture. Discipline without purpose becomes punishment. But when your purpose is fixed, when it is burned into your consciousness through repetition and autosuggestion, consistency transforms from an act of force into an act of identity. You do not act consistently because you are motivated. You act consistently because inconsistency would violate who you have decided to become. Hill emphasized burning desire not as wishful thinking, but as an obsession so intense that it reorganizes behavior automatically. Yet even burning desire does not emerge fully formed. It is cultivated through repeated focus, repeated visualization, repeated affirmation. Consistency precedes intensity. You do not wait to feel consumed by desire before acting. You act, and through action, desire sharpens. Through repetition, belief strengthens. Through discipline, faith becomes tangible. Faith, as Hill defined it, is not blind optimism. It is confidence born of repeated self-directed instruction to the subconscious mind. Autosuggestion is the mechanism through which consistency rewires belief. Every time you act in alignment with your goal despite resistance, you send a message to your subconscious that you are serious. Every time you quit early, delay action, or soften your standards, you send the opposite message. The subconscious does not judge. It accepts, and once it accepts a pattern, it enforces it. This is why forcing consistency feels uncomfortable at first. You are attempting to override an existing mental program. The mind resists change because change threatens its familiar patterns, even if those patterns are destructive. Fear emerges not because you are doing something wrong, but because you are doing something unfamiliar. Hill taught that fear is often a symptom of growth, a signal that you are moving beyond the boundaries of your conditioned identity. Most people interpret fear as a stop sign. The successful interpret it as confirmatio, and that they are on the edge of expansion. Consistency demands that you act before fear subsides, not after. If you wait to feel fearless, you will wait forever. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is obedience to purpose in the presence of fear. And obedience repeated daily is consistency. Persistence, one of Hill's central laws, is consistency stretched over time. Anyone can act for a day. Many can act for a week. Few can act for months without immediate reward, and almost none can act for years while results remain invisible. Yet this is precisely the price of mastery. The invisible phase is where most people quit. They conclude that nothing is happening because nothing is visible. But Hill revealed that the most important work happens beneath the surface. The subconscious is being reprogrammed. Habits are being formed. Identity is being reshaped. Momentum is being built silently. Consistency without visible reward is the ultimate test of faith. It is the moment when you must decide whether your commitment is conditional or absolute. Conditional commitment depends on feedback, validation, and progress markers. Absolute commitment depends only on decision. Hill insisted that decision is the doorway through which success enters. Indecision keeps the door permanently closed. When you decide to be consistent, truly decide, you eliminate negotiation. You remove the option to retreat. You close the door behind you. Self-discipline is the enforcement arm of consistency. DI. Discipline is not punishment. It is structure. It is the conscious imposition of order on chaos. Hill understood that the undisciplined mind is a breeding ground for fear, doubt, and procrastination. Discipline creates psychological safety. It tells the mind that there is a plan, a standard, a direction, and once the mind trusts that structure, resistance decreases. Imagination plays a crucial role here. You must see yourself as a consistent person before consistency feels natural. The subconscious responds to images more powerfully than logic. When you repeatedly imagine yourself showing up, executing, finishing, persisting, you create a mental blueprint. Consistency then becomes an act of alignment with that image. Without imagination, discipline feels mechanical. With imagination, it feels purposeful. Hill spoke often of the invisible forces that shape destiny. Thought, belief, repetition, emotion. These forces operate whether you acknowledge them or not. Consistency is the act of harnessing these forces deliberately. When you repeat constructive behavior, you set in motion a chain of cause and effect that cannot be reversed easily. Momentum builds, identity solidifies, resistance weakens. Eventually, what once required force becomes automatic. But the early phase is brutal. There is no romance in forcing consistency. It is quiet, it is lonely, it is repetitive. There are no applause, no instant transformations, no dramatic breakthroughs. Just you, your decision, and the daily execution of that decision. This is where most people fail, not because they lack intelligence or opportunity, but because they cannot tolerate the psychological discomfort of sustained effort without emotional reward. Hill warned that the habit of quitting is easy to form and difficult to break. Each act of inconsistency strengthens it. Conversely, each act of persistence weakens it. The mind learns through evidence. When you prove to yourself repeatedly that you do what you said you would do, self-trust is rebuilt. Confidence stops being something you seek externally and becomes something you generate internally through action. Consistency also demands mastery over time. Impatience is one of the most destructive enemies of success. The desire for quick results leads to scattered effort, constant strategy changes, and emotional burnout. Hill taught that nature does not rush, yet everything is accomplished. The same law applies to human achievement. When you commit to consistency, you are aligning yourself with natural law. You are allowing cause to mature into effect. Decision once made must be defended. Doubt will attempt to reopen the case. Fear will present new evidence. Fatigue will argue for compromise. This is where mental control becomes essential. You must refuse to entertain arguments against your own decision. Hill emphasized that the mind becomes what it feeds on. Feed it excuses, and it becomes weak. Feed it discipline, and it becomes powerful, forcing yourself to be consistent is not an act of cruelty toward yourself. It is an act of respect. It is the recognition that your future deserves more than your present comfort. It is the understanding that freedom is earned through structure, not spontaneity. That confidence is built through evidence, not affirmation. That greatness is forged through repetition, not inspiration. As this understanding settles in, something subtle begins to shift. You stop asking how you feel about doing the work. You stop negotiating with resistance. You stop waiting for motivation. You act because you decided to act. And through this simple but ruthless commitment, you begin to separate yourself from the masses, not through talent, not through luck, but through the rare ability to remain consistent when everything inside you wants to stop. This is the first conquest, the conquest of self, the foundation upon which every other form of success is built. Consistency, once chosen, immediately exposes the internal resistance that has been quietly ruling your life. This resistance is not external. It is not circumstance, nor lack of resources, nor other people. It is the accumulated weight of old habits, old fears, and old self-concepts that have grown comfortable in disorder. Napoleon Hill understood that the greatest enemy of progress is not failure, but familiarity with mediocrity. The mind clings to what it knows, even when what it knows is pain, stagnation, and regret. When you force consistency, you are not fighting the world. You are confronting the identity you have been rehearsing for years. The moment consistency becomes non-negotiable, the subconscious begins to revolt. It produces excuses with startling creativity. It amplifies fatigue. It magnifies doubt. It reminds you of past failures. It whispers that tomorrow will be better, that rest is deserved, that skipping once will not matter. This is not weakness. This is conditioning. Hill taught that the subconscious mind operates entirely on repetition and emotional intensity. If inconsistency has been repeated long enough, it becomes a law inside you, and laws do not dissolve politely. They must be replaced with greater force. This is where autosuggestion moves from theory to necessity. Autosuggestion is not positive thinking. It is not self-deception. It is the deliberate planting of new instructions into the subconscious through disciplined repetition. Every time you speak your intention, visualize your execution, and then follow through with action. You reinforce a new mental command. But autosuggestion without behavior is hollow. The subconscious believes action, not words. Action is proof. Consistent action is irrefutable evidence. Most people attempt to change their lives by changing their circumstances. Hill revealed the futility of this approach. Circumstances are effects, not causes. The cause lies in habitual thought patterns, emotional reactions, and decision-making behaviors. Consistency target the cause. It reshapes the internal environment so thoroughly that external circumstances have no choice but to follow. This process is slow by design. If it were fast, it would not last. Faith plays a critical role during this phase, but not the sentimental faith most people imagine. Faith, as Hill defined it, is sustained confidence in the unseen result, strengthened through disciplined repetition of belief and action. Faith grows when you keep promises to yourself. Every day you show up despite resistance. Faith becomes less abstract and more embodied. You begin to trust yourself again, and self-trust is the rarest and most valuable asset a person can possess. Fear, meanwhile, does not disappear, it evolves. Early on, fear screams loudly, demanding attention. Later, it becomes subtle, logical, persuasive. It disguises itself as practicality, caution, realism. Hill warned that fear is a master of disguise and that its most dangerous form is not panic, but rationalization. Consistency requires you to recognize fear without obeying it. You do not argue with fear. You do not attempt to eliminate it. You proceed as if it has no authority. This is where decision becomes sacred. A decision is not a preference. It is not a hope. It is a line drawn in the mind that separates what is acceptable from what is not. Hill observed that successful people make decisions quickly and change them slowly, if at all. The unsuccessful do the opposite. Consistency is impossible without firm decisions. Every undecided mind leaks energy. Every reopened decision drains momentum. When you decide to be consistent, you are deciding in advance how you will behave regardless of conditions. You are removing choice from moments of weakness. This is not rigidity. It is strategy. Soldiers do not debate orders in the middle of battle. Consistency is the same. You establish the rule before the pressure arrives. When the moment comes, you execute automatically. Imagination must be disciplined as well. An undisciplined imagination feeds fear by projecting failure, embarrassment, loss. A disciplined imagination reinforces consistency by repeatedly rehearsing execution and endurance. Hill taught that imagination is the workshop of the mind. What you build there eventually manifests in form. If you imagine quitting, you are practicing quitting. If you imagine persistence, you are training endurance. The invisible forces Hill spoke of are always active. Thought vibrations, emotional patterns, habitual focus. These shape perception and opportunity. Consistency aligns these forces in one direction. Scattered effort creates scattered results. Focused repetition creates momentum. Momentum is not dramatic. It is subtle, cumulative, and unstoppable once established. Persistence is often romanticized, but in reality it is monotonous. It is waking up and doing the same disciplined actions with no guarantee of reward that day. It is resisting the urge to reinvent yourself every time boredom appears. Boredom is not a signal to change direction. It is a test of seriousness. Hill understood that boredom arrives when novelty fades and commitment is required. Most people fail here. They confuse boredom with misalignment. In truth, boredom is the threshold of mastery. Self-discipline strengthens through use. The more you enforce consistency, the easier enforcement becomes. This does not mean the work becomes easy. It means resistance loses its authority. The mind learns that protest will not alter behavior. Eventually, it stops protesting. This is the point where consistency transforms into identity. You are no longer forcing yourself. You are expressing who you have become. But before this transformation occurs, there is a long stretch of psychological discomfort. Old habits die slowly. Old self-images fight to survive. You may feel isolated, misunderstood, disconnected from those who still live reactively. Hill noted that every major achievement requires a period of separation, mental if not physical. When you choose consistency, you are choosing to step out of the collective rhythm of excuses and into a solitary rhythm of execution. This solitude is not emptiness, it is focus. It is where clarity is sharpened. It is where purpose deepens. Definiteness of purpose becomes clearer when distractions fall away. Consistency strips life down to essentials. What matters, what does not, what you will tolerate, what you will not. Time becomes an ally rather than an enemy. Instead of rushing, you settle into the understanding that each day of consistent action compounds silently. Hill emphasized that nature rewards patience combined with effort. Seeds grow underground long before breaking the surface. The impatient dig them up to check progress and kill them in the process. Consistency is the willingness to leave the seed buried and tend the soil daily. As weeks turn into months, subtle shifts occur. Your emotional reactions soften. Your confidence stabilizes. Your identity becomes less dependent on outcomes and more rooted in process. You stop chasing motivation because you no longer need it. Motivation becomes a byproduct rather than a prerequisite. Fear of failure begins to lose relevance. Failure becomes information rather than identity. Consistency reframes mistakes as part of the process rather than proof of inadequacy. Hill taught that every failure carries the seed of equivalent advantage, but only for those disciplined enough to persist long enough to extract it. The world begins to respond differently to you as well, not because you demand it, but because consistency radiates credibility. People trust those who are predictable in their standards. Opportunities gravitate toward those who demonstrate reliability. Luck, so often credited for success, is merely the intersection of preparation and persistence. Yet even here, complacency is dangerous. Consistency must be defended continuously. The mind will attempt to relax standa. RDS, once progress appears, this is where many lose everything they have built. Hill warned that success attracts new forms of temptation. Comfort, ego, distraction, the discipline that created success must be maintained to keep it. True consistency is not rigid repetition of tasks, but unwavering loyalty to purpose. Methods may evolve, strategies may refine, but the daily commitment to disciplined action does not waver. This is the mark of mastery. By now, you may begin to sense that forcing consistency was never about productivity. It was about sovereignty, control over your attention, control over your behavior, control over your destiny. Hill believed that self-mastery is the highest form of achievement. Without it, all external success is fragile. Consistency builds the internal infrastructure required to sustain achievement. It forges mental toughness, emotional resilience, and decisiveness. It eliminates the chaos that drains energy and replaces it with ordered effort. And through this order, power emerges quietly. This is the second conquest. The conquest of drift, fear, and internal rebellion. And it sets the stage for something even more demanding, the long-term alignment of purpose, persistence, and belief that transforms effort into inevitability. As consistency settles into your behavior, a deeper confrontation begins, one that few are prepared for and even fewer endure without retreat. This confrontation is not with effort, nor with time, nor with difficulty. It is with the silent question that emerges once routine replaces novelty: why are you really doing this, and will you continue when no one is watching, applauding, or validating your struggle? Napoleon Hill understood that many people can imitate discipline temporarily, but only those anchored to a deeply internalized purpose can sustain it indefinitely. Consistency without purpose eventually collapses under its own weight. Purpose is the gravity that holds effort together. Definiteness of purpose is not a vague ambition. It is not a wish to be successful, respected, wealthy, or fulfilled. Hill was ruthless about this distinction. A definite purpose is a precise mental target, accepted by the subconscious as non-negotiable and supported by daily action. When purpose lacks clarity, consistency becomes mechanical, empty, and exhausting. But when purpose is definite, consistency becomes meaningful even in suffering. Pain with purpose is tolerable. Pain without purpose is unbearable. At this stage, the mind begins to test the authenticity of your commitment. Doubt becomes more philosophical. Instead of asking whether you are capable, it asks whether the goal is worth it. Instead of fear of failure, you encounter fear of sacrifice. Hill taught that every desire carries a price, and most people want the reward without paying the cost. Consistency forces you to pay incrementally, daily, often without immediate compensation. This exposes whether your desire is a passing impulse, a burning obsession. Burning desire is not loud. It does not always feel passionate or emotional. Often it feels quiet, heavy, and relentless. It is the refusal to let go of a goal even when enthusiasm fades. Hill emphasized that desire must be intensified through focus, visualization, and autosuggestion until it dominates the mind. But domination does not mean constant excitement. It means constant presence. The goal is always there, shaping decisions, filtering distractions, guiding behavior. As weeks and months of consistency accumulate, the subconscious begins to reorganize priorities. What once felt urgent loses importance. What once felt optional becomes essential. This is not conscious effort, it is conditioning. The mind adapts to whatever it is repeatedly exposed to. Consistency trains the mind to expect discipline. Inconsistency trains it to expect relief. You are teaching your nervous system how to live. At this point, many encounter a strange emotional flatness. The highs of starting are gone, the lows of resistance have softened. There is simply the work. This neutrality confuses people. They mistake the absence of emotional intensity for loss of purpose. In reality, this is maturity. Hill understood that true power operates calmly. Emotional volatility is a sign of inner instability. Consistency smooths the emotional extremes and replaces them with steadiness. Steadiness is dangerous to the undisciplined mind because it removes drama, and drama is addictive. Many people unconsciously sabotage consistency because it deprives them of emotional stimulation. Struggle becomes an identity. Complaining becomes connection. Consistency threatens this because it resolves problems quietly instead of broadcasting them. Hill warned that the mind will seek excuses to reintroduce chaos because chaos feels familiar. This is where self-discipline must evolve beyond enforcement into self-command. Early discipline relies on willpower. Later discipline relies on identity. You no longer ask whether you will act. You assume you will. The question becomes how well. This shift marks the transition from effort to mastery, but mastery demands vigilance. The mind will attempt to negotiate standards downward. It will suggest shortcuts, justifications, exceptions. These are tests of authority. Either you command your behavior or your impulses do. Decision-making becomes sharper here. Hill taught that indecision is the seedbed of fear. When decisions are delayed, anxiety grows. When decisions are made and acted upon consistently, anxiety diminishes. You begin to trust your judgment not because it is perfect, but because it is decisive. Consistency builds decisiveness by reducing the cost of commitment. You learn that acting imperfectly is better than waiting endlessly. Imagination must now be guarded carefully. At this stage, imagination can either reinforce endurance or erode it. The mind may begin to imagine alternative lives, easier paths, different goals. Comparison creeps in. Hill warned that comparison is one of the most destructive habits because it shifts focus outward and fractures purpose. Consistency demands selective blindness. You do not need to know what others are doing. You need to know what you decided to do. Autosuggestion becomes more subtle but more powerful. You are no longer repeating affirmations to convince yourself. You are reinforcing identity through evidence. Each day of execution whispers to the subconscious, this is who you are now. Words fade. Behavior remains. Hill emphasized that the subconscious accepts behavior as truth. This is why consistency changes self-image more effectively than any motivational speech. Fear transforms again. It no longer appears as fear of failure or fear of starting. It appears as fear of permanence. The realization dawns that if you continue, there is no turning back. Your old excuses will lose credibility. Your environment may change. Your relationships may shift. Hill noted that growth often disrupts existing social dynamics. Consistency separates you psychologically from those who live reactively. This separation can feel like loss. Many retreat here not because the work is hard, but because the distance from their former identity feels uncomfortable. But this discomfort is a sign of alignment. You are shedding an old self-concept that no longer fits. Consistency exposes false identities and replaces them with earned confidence, confidence born of repetit. Ion is stable. It does not inflate with praise or collapse with criticism. It rests on evidence. Persistence now reveals its deeper function. It is not merely about enduring difficulty. It is about maintaining focus across time without emotional reward. Hill believed that persistence is the direct expression of faith. Faith is belief in advance of proof. Persistence is behavior in advance of reward. When these two align, results become inevitable. Even if timing remains uncertain, time perception changes as well. You stop measuring progress emotionally and start measuring it structurally. Are the systems in place? Are the behaviors repeated? Are decisions aligned? Hill taught that success is not an event but a process. When you commit to the process consistently, outcomes are no longer a question of if but when. The invisible forces begin to compound quietly. Opportunities emerge not dramatically but logically. Skills sharpen. Awareness deepens. intuition improves. These are not mystical occurrences. They are the result of sustained attention and disciplined thought. Hill described this as the mind tuning itself to opportunity through focused desire. Consistency keeps the signal clear. At this level, setbacks lose their emotional charge. They are no longer personal, they are procedural. Something did not work. Adjust. Continue. This emotional neutrality is often misunderstood as coldness. In reality, it is clarity. Emotional overreaction drains energy. Consistency consusts. RVs it. Yet the greatest danger here is subtle arrogance. The mind may begin to feel superior, disciplined, different. Hill warned that ego is a silent destroyer of success. The moment consistency becomes a source of self-importance rather than self-mastery, discipline weakens. Humility must be maintained. The work is never finished. Standards must remain internal, not comparative. Consistency must also remain flexible in method while rigid in commitment. Many fail by clinging to ineffective strategies out of pride. Hill emphasized that persistence does not mean stubbornness. It means loyalty to purpose, not to approach. Adjusting methods is not quitting. Quitting is abandoning the goal. As this understanding deepens, consistency becomes less about forcing and more about alignment. You wake up oriented, decisions feel clearer, distractions lose appeal. This is not because temptation disappears, but because it no longer fits your identity. Hill described this as harmony between conscious desire and subconscious belief. When harmony exists, effort feels lighter even when work remains heavy. The internal dialogue changes. You stop asking for permission. You stop explaining yourself internally. You act. This silence is powerful. It is the silence of certainty, not certainty of outcome, but certainty of direction. This stage is rare. Many never reach it because it requires enduring long periods of obscurity and repetition. But those who do experience a profound shift, success, thus no longer feels distant. It feels underway, not because results are guaranteed tomorrow, but because the internal conditions for success are now stable. Consistency has moved from an imposed discipline to a lived principle. And with this shift, the groundwork is laid for the most difficult challenge yet, sustaining intensity and integrity as responsibility, pressure, and expectation increased. When consistency has reshaped your identity and steadied your inner world, a new and more complex challenge emerges, one that Napoleon Hill understood as the true dividing line between temporary achievers and those who permanently alter their destiny. This challenge is not about starting or sustaining effort, but about maintaining inner control as pressure increases and expectations rise. Consistency attracts responsibility. Responsibility attracts weight, and weight reveals the true strength of the mind. At this stage, the external world begins to respond. Results appear, even if modest at first. Progress becomes visible, and with visibility comes scrutiny, both internal and external. The mind now faces a different kind of temptation, the temptation to relax standards, to negotiate discipline, to believe that past effort has earned future ease. Hill warned that success is most vulnerable at the moment it begins to appear. The same discipline that built momentum must now protect it. Self-discipline evolves again here. It is no longer about forcing yourself to act, but about restraint. Ning yourself from excess, distraction, and ego-driven behavior. Hill taught that self-control is the highest form of discipline. When you have nothing, restraint feels unnecessary. When you begin to gain ground, restraint becomes essential. Consistency without restraint leads to overextension. Overextension leads to collapse. The subconscious, now trained to expect execution, may begin to seek stimulation elsewhere. Success creates emotional energy. That energy can be directed toward refinement, or it can spill into indulgence. Hill observed that many people sabotage their progress not out of fear, but out of unconscious guilt or unfamiliarity with stability. Chaos feels safer than sustained order because chaos is familiar. Consistency must now be defended against comfort. Fear changes shape once more. Earlier, fear warned you against starting. Later, it warned you against persisting. Now it warns you against losing what you have built. Fear of loss can be more paralyzing than fear of failure. Hill emphasized that attachment to outcomes weakens performance. When you begin to protect results instead of executing purpose, consistency erodes. The focus shifts from process to preservation, and preservation breeds hesitation. This is where definiteness of purpose must be reaffirmed, not as ambition, but as alignment. Why you are doing this must be revisited at a deeper level. Superficial reasons will not withstand pressure. Hill taught that purpose anchored in service, contribution, or deeply personal meaning creates resilience. Purpose anchored solely in status or validation collapses under scrutiny. Decision-making now carries greater consequence. Indecision becomes costly. Delayed decisions create bottlenecks. Hill observed that leaders are distinguished by their willingness to decide under uncertainty. Consistency in decision-making builds trust internally and externally. You begin to operate from principle rather than reaction. This shift is subtle but profound. The invisible forces become more active here. Thought patterns attract corresponding opportunities and challenges. Focused minds notice openings others miss, but scattered attention dissipates these forces. Hill believed that mental energy must be conserved and directed intentionally. Consistency now includes consistency of thought, emotional regulation, and attention. Imagination must be elevated. Earlier, imagination was used to visualize execution and persistence. Now it must be used to anticipate complexity, risk, and consequence without descending into fear. Hill taught that imagination, guided by discipline, becomes foresight. Foresight allows you to prepare mentally before challenges appear. This preparation reduces emotional shock and preserves consistency under stress. The temptation to compare returns strongly here. As progress becomes visible, comparison invites both envy and arrogance. Hill warned that comparison distorts judgment and weakens focus. Your path is single. Consistency requires loyalty to your trajectory, not reaction to others. External metrics are distractions. Internal standards must remain supreme. Autosuggestion continues, but it becomes quieter, more integrated. You are no longer convincing yourself that you are disciplined. You are reinforcing standards, how you operate, what you tolerate, what you refuse. The subconscious now enforces these standards automatically. Violations feel uncomfortable immediately. This discomfort is not guilt. It is alignment correcting deviation. Persistence takes on a refined form. It is no longer about surviving resistance, but about sustaining quality. Repetition without attention leads to stagnation. Hill emphasized that persistence must be intelligent. You must observe, adjust, refine, and recommit continuously. Consistency without awareness becomes rigidity. Rigidity breaks under pressure. Responsibility expands, and with it, the need for emotional mastery. Emotional reactions that were once private now have broader impact. Hill understood that emotional discipline is critical at higher levels of achievement. Anger, impatience, pride, and anxiety must be regulated deliberately. Consistency includes consistency of temperament. This is where many falter. They can manage themselves in isolation, but struggle under observation. The presence of expectation disrupts inner balance. Hill taught that true mastery is maintaining internal standards regardless of external attention. Whether praised or criticized, the work continues unchanged. Fear mastery is tested here more intensely than before. Fear of judgment, fear of exposure, fear of responsibility. These fears tempt you to retreat into safety or delegate your power. Hill insisted that leadership begins with self-leadership. You cannot outsource consistency. You must embody it visibly and privately. Time management evolves as well. Time becomes more valuable. Distractions become more costly. Hill emphasized that successful individuals guard their time fiercely because they understand its compounding nature. Consistency requires saying no without guilt. Every yes must align with purpose. Everything else is interference. At this level, the mind may attempt to romanticize struggle again, to create unnecessary difficulty as proof of worthiness. This is another trap. Hill taught that struggle is not virtuous. Effectiveness is. Consistency does not mean suffering unnecessarily. It means executing intelligently with minimal wasted effort. Efficiency is a form of discipline. You begin to sense the weight of legacy here, not in a grandiose way, but in quiet responsibility. What you do consistently now shapes not only your future, but the environment around you. Standards influence others implicitly. Hill believed that leadership transmits through example more powerfully than instruction, yet humility must remain intact. The moment you believe consistency has made you immune to failure, discipline weakens. Vigilance is required. Standards must be reviewed, reaffirmed, and enforced continuously. There is no finish line for self-mastery. Consistency at this stage feels less dramatic but more consequential. Small deviations have larger effects. Small improvements compound faster. The margin for error narrows. This is not pressure to fear, but structure to respect. As you move through this phase, you begin to understand that success is not something you reach and then enjoy indefinitely. It is something you maintain through continual alignment. Hill's philosophy was never about arrival. It was about becoming. And becoming requires consistency at every level of thought, emotion, and action. This prepares you for the most demanding test of all, sustaining inner integrity and relentless persistence when success is no longer hypothetical, when the cost of quitting is high, and when the responsibility for your destiny can no longer be denied. There comes a moment in the long discipline of consistency when the mind can no longer hide behind uncertainty, when excuses lose their credibility, and when the truth becomes unavoidable. The life you are building is no longer accidental. At this stage, success is not a distant concept or an abstract hope. It is forming shape. It is demanding ownership. And with that demand comes a heavier psychological burden than most people ever experience. Napoleon Hill understood this moment well because it is here that the final illusions collapse. Early inconsistency could be blamed on confusion, fear, lack of clarity, or lack of belief. Now those explanations no longer hold. You know what you are doing. You know why you are doing it. You know what happens when you stop. And precisely because of that knowledge, the responsibility intensifies. Responsibility is uncomfortable because it removes the ability to pretend. You are no longer experimenting. You are choosing. This is where many quietly sabotage themselves, not through dramatic failure, but through subtle erosion of standards, a little less intensity, a little more delay, a small compromise justified as balance, rest, or realism. Hill warned that the most dangerous enemies of success are not violent disruptions, but gradual relaxations. The mind rarely announces surrender. It negotiates it. Consistency must now become ruthless in its clarity, not harsh, not emotional, but uncompromising. You must know exactly what behaviors are required to maintain alignment with your purpose, and you must execute them whether or not they feel significant on any given day. At this level, the work often feels deceptively simple. The challenge is not complexity. It is repetition without applause. The ego becomes a more sophisticated adversary here. Earlier, ego sought validation through quitting or proving victimhood. Now it seeks validation through recognition, authority, and identity. Hill taught that ego, when unchecked, corrupts discipline by shifting the motive from purpose to image. When image becomes the priority, consistency becomes performance. And performance collapses when the audience changes. True consistency is private. It is who you are when no one is watching, and when watching changes nothing. This distinction is critical. Many people can maintain discipline under observation. Very few can maintain it in solitude once progress is established. Hill understood that solitude is where character is either reinforced or quietly abandoned. Faith must deepen here because outcomes are no longer hypothetical, but they are still incomplete. You can see the direction, but not the destination. Impatience returns in a new form, not impatience for proof, but impatience for closure. The desire to arrive, to rest, to be finished. Hill emphasized that there is no finished state. Life rewards movement, not arrival. The moment you believe you have arrived, decay begins. Fear, too, becomes more existential. It is no longer fear of failing to become something, but fear of being fully responsible for what you are becoming. There is a subtle terror in realizing that your future will be the logical extension of your current consistency. There will be no one else to blame, no circumstance to hide behind, no story to tell about bad luck. This clarity is liberating and frightening at the same time. Many retreat here not because they cannot continue, but because continuing removes the comfort of excuses. Hill observed that some people prefer the pain of unreally. Z potential to the vulnerability of full commitment. Because full commitment means exposure. It means standing behind your decisions completely. It means accepting the consequences without resentment. Self-discipline now demands emotional austerity. You must regulate not only negative emotions, but positive ones as well. Excitement, pride, anticipation, these can destabilize focus if indulged excessively. Hill believed that emotional balance was a hallmark of mastery. Extremes, whether high or low, cloud judgment. Consistency requires steadiness. The imagination must now be used with restraint. Earlier imagination fueled desire and persistence. Now it must prevent distraction. The mind may begin to fantasize about what success will bring, comfort, recognition, freedom. These fantasies, if unchecked, can weaken execution by pulling attention into the future. Hill taught that the present moment is the only point of power. Consistency lives there. Decision-making becomes heavier but clearer. You are no longer choosing between action and inaction. You are choosing between refinement and stagnation. The margin between progress and regression narrows. Small lapses have disproportionate impact. Hill emphasized that as you rise, the cost of error increases. This is not punishment. It is structure. The invisible forces you have been cultivating now operate with greater intensity. Thought patterns manifest faster. Emotional reactions echo further. This is why mental control becomes non-negotiable. You can no longer afford careless thinking. Pessimism, resentment, entitlement, these poison momentum quietly. Hill taught that thoughts are causes, not decorations. At this stage, causation accelerates. Persistence must now be married to intelligence. Blind endurance is no longer sufficient. You must observe results dispassionately, identify inefficiencies, and correct them without ego. Hill was clear that persistence does not excuse ignorance. The disciplined mind is always learning, always adjusting, always refining without losing direction. This is where many confuse humility with self-doubt. True humility does not question your right to pursue your purpose. It questions your methods, assumptions, and blind spots. Consistency paired with humility creates adaptability. Consistency paired with arrogance creates fragility. Time feels different here. Days feel dense. Weeks carry weight. You begin to understand how quickly life passes and how expensive distraction truly is. Hill believed that awareness of time's value sharpens discipline. Wasted time is no longer abstract. It feels like theft from your future. Relationships often shift at this stage. Some people drift away, unable to relate to your standards. Others project their own discomfort onto you. Hill noted that growth often creates friction, not because you have changed values, but because you have enforced them. Consistency exposes contrast. This can feel isolating, but it is necessary. Loneliness may appear not as absence of people, but as absence of shared mindset. This is a critical test. Many abandon consistency here to regain emotional comfort. Hill warned that the desire to belong can override the desire to achieve if not consciously managed. You must decide which discomfort you are willing to tolerate, the discomfort of discipline or the discomfort of regret. The inner dialogue becomes stark. There's less noise, fewer justifications, fewer stories. You see clearly when you are aligned and when you are not. There is no drama in this awareness. Only responsibility. This clarity is power, but it demands courage. At this point, consistency is no longer something you practice. It is something you protect. You protect it from distraction, from ego, from comfort, from fatigue, from sentimentality. You protect it because you understand its cost and its value. You know how rare it is. You know how easily it can be lost. Hill believed that success is sustained not by talent or opportunity, but by character expressed through disciplined action over time. Character is revealed under pressure, not comfort. and pressure is now part of your daily environment. This is not a burden to resent. It is proof that you are operating at a level where your actions matter. There is a quiet dignity that emerges here. Not pride, not arrogance, but composure. You do not need to announce what you are doing. You do not need reassurance. You move forward steadily, aware of the way. You carry and willing to carry it. This is the threshold. On one side lies the temptation to ease back, to settle, to protect what has been built and call it enough. On the other side lies total ownership of your destiny, without illusion, without excuse, without retreat. Consistency has brought you here, and what comes next will demand more than discipline. It will demand absolute commitment. There is no illusion left now, no mystery to hide behind, no unanswered question about what creates success and what destroys it. You have walked far enough into consistency that the truth stands exposed, unforgiving, and undeniable. Your life is the exact consequence of what you repeatedly do, tolerate, think, and decide. Not once, not occasionally, but relentlessly, daily, without exception. Napoleon Hill understood that this realization is the final dividing line between those who merely understand success and those who embody it. At this level, there is no room for hope as a strategy. Hope is passive. You are past that. There is no room for motivation as a crutch. Motivation is unreliable. You are past that. There is only command. Command over your mind, command over your emotions, command over your behavior, and command over your direction. Consistency has stripped away every comforting lie and left you with one permanent responsibility: to govern yourself completely. This is where most people instinctively recoil, not because they cannot do what is required, but because they sense the permanence of what they are becoming. To continue now is to accept that there will be no return to unconscious living. No more drifting, no more blaming circumstances, no more romanticizing struggle or postponing commitment. You will either move forward deliberately or you will consciously choose decline. There is no neutral ground left. Hill taught that destiny is not something that happens to a person. It is something a person accepts or rejects through decision. You are standing inside that decision now. The habits you have built through forced consistency have proven something irreversible. You are capable of governing yourself. The question is no longer whether you can. The question is whether you will maintain that authority when comfort tempts you to surrender it. Success at its highest level is not accumulation. It is alignment. Alignment between what you think, what you say, what you do, and what you refuse to tolerate. Misalignment is where energy leaks. Alignment is where power concentrates. Consistency is the mechanism that creates and preserves this alignment. Without it, intelligence scatters, talent decays, opportunity evaporates. With it, even ordinary effort compounds into extraordinary outcomes. Fear will make its final stand here, not as panic, not as doubt, but as subtle permission to soften, to rest longer than necessary, to delay what must be done today, to assume that yesterday's discipline has earned tomorrow's ease. This is the most dangerous lie the mind will ever tell you. Hill warned that nature does not reward past effort. It rewards present action. The moment you stop enforcing standards, decline begins silently. You must understand this clearly. Consistency is not something you achieve once. It is something you recommit to every day. There is no graduation from discipline. There is no finish line where vigilance becomes unnecessary. The price of greatness is not paid up front. It is paid continuously. And those who resent this price eventually lose everything they built trying to escape it. The invisible forces that govern success are now fully under your control, but only if you remain deliberate. Thought becomes destiny faster now. Emotional reactions carry more weight. Decisions ripple further. This is power, but power without discipline destroys its holder. Hill was explicit about this. Self-mastery must always precede and exceed external mastery, or success will turn against you. You are no longer preparing for responsibility. You are living inside it. Every day you choose whether to reinforce the identity you have built or quietly dismantle it. There are no dramatic collapses at this level. There are only small betrayals repeated until character erodes. And there are no dramatic victories either. There is only steady execution repeated until destiny has no choice but to conform. Understand this deeply. The world does not reward intention, it rewards consistency. It does not respond to desire alone. It responds to disciplined desire enforced through action. Hill's entire philosophy can be reduced to this single command: decide what you want, decide who you must become to achieve it, and then refuse to stop acting in alignment with that decision no matter what you feel. This is the moment where you either accept total responsibility for your life or abandon the right to complain about it forever. There is no partial ownership. You cannot demand extraordinary results while permitting ordinary discipline. You cannot expect mastery while negotiating with weakness. You cannot build a powerful destiny with a fragmented mind. You must now decide once and for all that your word to yourself is law, that when you say you will act, action follows, that when resistance appears, obedience to purpose overrides emotion, that when fatigue whispers retreat, discipline answers forward, that when fear speaks, decision remains silent and unmoved. Do not wait for confidence. Confidence is built by doing what you said you would do long after enthusiasm disappears. Do not wait for clarity. Clarity emerges through motion. Do not wait for the right time. The right time is created by consistent action applied to the present moment. Fork, yourself to be consistent not because it is easy, but because it is the only path that works. Force yourself because no one else can do it for you. Force yourself because every day you delay, the cost compounds against you. Force yourself because the alternative is a lifetime of knowing what you were capable of and choosing comfort instead. This is not a suggestion. It is a demand life places on those who refuse to drift. Decide now that you will show up every day with discipline whether you feel ready or not. Decide that excuses are no longer valid. Decide that your future will not be left to chance, mood, or circumstance. Decide that from this moment forward, consistency is not something you attempt, but something you enforce. Stand up internally. Take full command of your mind. Lock your purpose into place, and then act today, act tomorrow, and act the day after that with the same unbreakable standard until your behavior reshapes your identity, and your identity reshapes your destiny. There is no other way. And now that you know this, there is no excuse left to avoid it.